Hey everyone, this is Steve with another episode of Keep 'em Rolling, and it is my honor to be able to share this grouping with you. This is a grouping that came my way a couple of months ago. I've actually known about this grouping for several years, and it's not only fascinating for what the soldier did, but it's also fascinating of how it finally came into my possession. So, I'm an individual that, as far as collecting goes, I love seeking the items out, I love researching the items, but I also love displaying the items. And I love taking them around and sharing them with other people. And I encourage all of you, look around in your community and figure out ways that you can display your militaria. One place that I display mine is at my local library. Every year, and this has been going on for quite a few years now, during the month of November, they let me use their display cases to put on a military display. And it uses items from my collection, uses items from the community, and so forth and so on. And that's where about 5 years ago I met Private First Class M. And we're just going to use the first initial of his last name just for the sake of the family. Now, I was setting up my display at the library, and Private First Class M came in and said, hey, would you be interested in using my memorabilia? I was in the Korean conflict. And I thought, well, I'm always open to meeting veterans. I'm always open to seeing their memorabilia. So I, definitely want to use your material. And we made an appointment. He met me at the library, brought his military memorabilia in, and I learned 3 things about Private First Class M right away. Number 1, his military memorabilia was very important to him, almost to the point that I didn't want to do the display for fear that if something happened to the items. But he was like, no. He goes, I really want to share them, but they're just really important to me. The second thing I learned about Private First Class M was that he was very humble. He didn't even want his name put on the display, and it took a lot of coaxing to finally get him to agree. His big thing was, he goes, I don't want people to think I'm special. He goes, I'm not special. I'm not a hero. He goes, I did a job. He goes, I wasn't in combat. He goes, the guys that fought and died over in Korea, they're the true heroes, not me. He was in the medical department. So, we did put his name on the display. He actually reviewed all the signs I made to make sure I wasn't kind of, building him up in any way, shape, or form. So, very humble guy, which I really appreciated as well. The third thing I learned about him was he had his Korean War lingo down. And for those of you who deal with veterans, try and know how they view different things. For instance, with this, I asked him, did he prefer Korean conflict or Korean War? And he really didn't care. He said that didn't bother him at all. But in our conversation, he said, I have to ask you, when did the Korean War end? And I said, well, really it hasn't ended yet. And he was like, oh man, you know your stuff. And the big thing for him was the fact that the Korean War has never ended. We have the armistice, but we don't have anything officially ending the war. And that's been true with a couple other Korean War veterans I've talked to, is that that's like a sticking point. The war has not ended. So, did the display. We did it for a couple of years. It was fantastic. I loved talking with him. His stories were just incredible about what he did. He actually worked for a prisoner of war camp, a UN prisoner of war camp, housing communist North Korean and just regular North Korean soldiers. It was located in South Korea. His jobs in the camp were traditional, like guard and so forth and so on, but he was also responsible for inspecting prisoners, confiscating contraband, because he said the communists would often create political contraband to kind of keep the communistic ideology going, if you will. His job was to conduct autopsies on prisoners who had died while in custody, because the UN was real big about making sure that the prisoners were not, quote, tortured. They wanted to prove that, they died of natural causes, what have you, not torture. So that was one of his responsibilities. And he also worked with a local leper colony. So I'm like, holy cow, oftentimes when we think of the Korean conflict or Korean War, we think of the fighting. We don't look at these kind of back area aspects that were necessary. And I never researched, prisoner of war camps. So it was just fascinating to listen to what he talked about. He told stories of riots, where the communists took over. He said the communists were the ones that were really in control of the camp, as far as the interior goes. And he said they tried to kind of influence all of the non-communist prisoners. He said a lot of the North Korean regular soldiers just wanted to come south, get away from the whole communist ideology. He said the communists didn't like that. So he said there were a lot of deaths where non-communist prisoners were tortured by, pro-communist prisoners and so forth and so on. He said there was actually a big riot where they took over the camp. And then he said the people that hated the communists the most were the South Korean kind of police, if you will, that were at the camp. He said they just detested North Korean communists, and he said it was pretty bad when they retook the camp. It was just a horrific bloodbath. So lots of just wild stories that came out of this. But to continue on with how this came my way, I saw him in 2000, see, this is 2019, it had to be mid-2017, talked to him about doing the exhibit in 2017, and he didn't look well at that time, and he said, you know, he goes, I'm just not doing well. He goes, I don't think I'm going to be around much longer. He goes, you know, I've been to my doctor, things don't look good. I'm just not going to do the display this year being 2017. He says, it's been fun working with you. I've really enjoyed it. And, you know, I asked him if there's anything I could do for him. And he was like, nope, you know, nothing really, but thank you. It's been fun. Shook my hand, and that's the last I saw of him. And all of 2017, didn't see of him. Didn't see anything of him. 2018, didn't see anything of him. Assumed that he had, you know, passed away. I'd run into him out in public every so often, so when I didn't see him, it was kind of like, that's not good. 2019, didn't see anything. And then right before I put the display up, in October of this year, 2019, I got a phone call from his daughter. And his daughter said that, you know, her dad had passed away, actually, I think it was August of this year, 2019. So he had lived longer than he thought. And they were going through the house, kind of, you know, cleaning things out to sell it. And she came across the box I'd given him to store all his military memorabilia. And she knew that I really liked working with him, and he loved doing the display. So, you know, she asked if I'd be willing to do one more display with the memorabilia. And I was elated because I never thought I'd see these items again. So I told her definitely yes. And she brought everything in. We did the display. And then in the end, she said, you know, my family talked. And, you know, we're trying to figure out what to do with all of Dad's stuff, and we feel that you would be the best person to care for his military memorabilia. He really liked the displays. You're very passionate about it. And you know, it was just an honor. You know, it's one of those just, you know, words can't sum up the fact that the family trusted me enough to now take control of their dad's stuff. And to think about Private First Class M and how he treasured these items, it's now my responsibility to treasure them just as much and to care for them just as much as he did. Now, this has put me in a difficult situation because for those of you out there who have yet to have anything given to you, number one, it will happen. If you're out there doing things and if you really enjoy this hobby, things will come your way. I didn't believe it when I first started, and now I'm a believer. Okay, so don't give up hope. But when you take control of these things, you have almost an obligation. And this has been a big argument where I hear, you know, people in some of the forums and that they'll, you know, a grouping will come up for sale and the person breaks it all apart and they're like, oh, how could they do that? And it's their right to do that. You know, I mean, if they want to take it and sell it all separately, they own it. But for me, it's an obligation, kind of a moral obligation. I agreed to be the caretaker of this uniform, and now my responsibility is to use it, to share it, but then to also figure out who gets it next. Where does it go when I am done with it? Because I don't want it to end up at an estate sale. I don't want it to end up at a garage sale or a flea market. I want to pass it on to the next worthy person, if you will. So that's kind of a conundrum. And I'll talk about a little bit more of that in future videos. So, but I'm working on, you know, what do I do with these things besides enjoy them? Because right now I am just going to treasure this greatly. And it's such a nice memory too, because every time I look at that, I can see Private First Class M in my head. I can hear his voice. I can hear the stories that we talked about and stuff. So, you know, just all those good memories. But, well, we're 9 minutes in, and I haven't shown you the stuff. So let's talk about the uniform itself. The uniform is your standard Ike jacket. It's Korean War dated. You can see it's got his rank here, a Private First Class. It's got the collar discs, U.S., and then the medical, the caduceus. It's got these DIs, and I've yet to figure out what unit these are for, but I know they're medical. Okay, I've at least gotten that much research done on them. When we look down here, you can see we have his ribbons. And his ribbons are, the one that's all stripy is the UN Korean Service ribbon on the left, and then the one on the right is the Korean War ribbon, and it has 4 battle stars on it. So he was in campaign, so he qualified for those. And then right below it, we have his, it's the Army Sharpshooters badge. So it's the sharpshooter shooting badge, so it's for sharpshooter. And when you look on there, we have a sharpshooter hanger, a rifle hanger, and a carbine hanger. And then the cool thing is, in his papers, if you will, we have the scorebook showing all of his qualifications for the rifle and the carbine, which is really cool. I mean, I see these books all the time, but they're very rarely filled out. So this one, we actually have it all filled out, and we can attribute it to the badge here. If you look over here on his right shoulder, no, I'm sorry, it's our right, his left, if you will. On his left shoulder, we have an 8th Army insignia. I don't know why that blurred out. There we go. And the 8th Army insignia is a wonderful felt with a bullion on there. And it's truly stunning. This would have been bright silver when it first was sewn on. It's tarnished over the years, as bullion often does. I had one individual tell me that he's had success using like ammonia with Q-tips cleaning bullion insignia. For me, I'm just going to leave it as it is. Bullion is very delicate. It's actually bullion thread that's sewn in there, and if you rub it the wrong way, if you rub it too hard, you can actually break the threads and it starts to come apart, and we do not want that to happen. So, beautiful 8th Army insignia. And then down here, we have some bullion overseas bars, year and a half overseas. As I said, he was in from 1951 through 1953. Have his overseas cap with the same descriptive insignia. We also have a real nice whistle here, and it's marked US GAR 1951. Has the uniform hanger here. I'm assuming being at a POW camp, it was probably necessary to have a whistle. And then we have a couple spare overseas caps, one piped with the medical piping and one just unpiped, as this one is, which is unpiped. So, a beautiful, beautiful uniform. Along with it, we have the khaki shirt. We do have his trousers, which I'll flip up and show you. Got the trousers complete with the belt. And we have his tie, and his tie is a rare bird, if you will. His tie is the true Korean War or Korean War era Class A tie. You see the khaki ties all the time. This is the green one, and it is hideous, to be quite honest with you. If you look at that color, it just does not match. It's like a kind of a weird green versus the OD green of the uniform. I think khaki would look much better with this, but this is the correct tie. I've done my research. This is the correct tie they use. It's almost like they dyed a khaki tie, this green. It's almost got that texture of something that's been dyed. They're hard to find. And they're hard to find because if you saw this in an antique shop, if you saw this at a flea market or Goodwill, you would not associate this with Korean War. You'd associate it with just an ugly man's dress tie. So when you're out there looking, look for those ones that they look like an army tie, but they're a weird green. Man, it's truly an odd green, but that's the correct tie. I'm gonna zoom in on there just so you get one more time a good representation of that. Nick, let's pull it out. I'll just pull it right out so you can kind of. I mean, there you go. Now, along with the uniform, I received a bunch of kind of paper items and other miscellaneous things. A really nice logistical command insignia. I would love to have asked him how he got this. I mean, it's appropriate for what he did with medical and, with POWs. You can see Peninsula there. It's really neat. I received a whole slew of photographs, both of Private First Class M and his buddies. The scrapbook pages have things like there's a really neat drawing of him. There are notes that he took about, for instance, that riot and other things. And then there's all these photographs. And when you look at the photographs, you can see, nice representations of uniforms. These are all taken in Korea. I think there's just a couple loose ones, like in this pile here, because these are all photographs also. There's a couple loose ones of, sorry for the glare there, of him stateside before going over, but most of them are taken in Korea, either on leave or at the POW camp. He also had quite a few taken in the leper colony where he did work. I'm going to come down here. I have a couple pictures. This one is Private First Class M, and he is, rest and relaxation at the POW camp. And when you look back here, that's the stockade right there. And then down here we have another one of him. This time he's on guard duty. And you can see right there the prisoner of war enclosure. You can see he's carrying his rifle there. Next to it, I have a medical book that he was given, and he stressed this when he showed me this book. He stressed over and over again how important this book was to him because he was not a surgeon, but he used this book when conducting autopsies. He said, I did a lot of reading on this. It really helped me in that vein of having to perform that duty. So just amazing. This was when he said one of his prized possessions. So you can see how thick it is there too. Dated 1950. August 1950. Along with photographs and that, we have the rolled photograph. I think all these groupings have at least one class photograph like this. These panoramic photographs are great, but they're also a pain because if you want to flatten them, it takes a lot of work. This one's not too bad. It's still pliable. This could probably be flattened with just weights, putting it on a flat surface, weighting it down, and then waiting for a couple of months. Sometimes you have to actually introduce steam, moisture to get these to flatten out. You can see it is named. He is in there. It's his graduating class in 51 in the military. I also received a whole pile of paperwork of his. So there's different documents, different clippings, just kind of the random flotsam and jetsam of a soldier's career, but it tells his story, which I really like. And then there were these church programs, and when I first saw this, I'm like, it's just a typical church program, similar to what you see today. And then I opened up the inside because I'm like, he saved it for a reason. And when we look at here, this is for prisoner of war camp number 2, October 1952. So this was something that he actually went to church and saved the program from that prisoner of war camp in South Korea. And once again, holding this, it's not a significant item, but holding it, he picked that up that day going to church and then for whatever reason sent it home or carried it home with him. It was there. This was there in South Korea. At just 100 yards from where he was sitting with this program were North Korean prisoners of war. How amazing is that? The family found a medal. It's just a nice, he picked this up, it's just your Korean War service medal, but it's the 50th anniversary medal, so kind of neat. But the fantastic part of this collection, besides what you've seen here, which is amazing, besides the fact I got to know this veteran, besides I got to hear these stories firsthand, are these items right here. Because as I mentioned, Private First Class M was responsible for liberating contraband from the prisoners. And he told me that the prisoners were very ingenious about creating contraband. Because when they came into the prison, they were obviously searched quite well. So they weren't allowed to have anything on them. But once inside, they began to create. And they created political material, such as this. This long banner right here, this is a North Korean flag. And this North Korean flag, they got to before it was completed. It does not have the star on it here. You can see where they were starting to prep it. And no star. So he said that, he took it off one of the prisoners, much to the prisoner's anger, and he said that they would just destroy these items. But he decided he would bring this particular one home, put it in his bag, and it came home with him as a souvenir. These are all handmade, ladies and gentlemen. In other words, these prisoners don't request cloth. They don't, it's not like they're, putting the word out on the other side of the wire of, hey, can someone smuggle some, blue and white and red cloth into me? No, what they do is they dye these items. They cut pieces off blankets. They cut pieces off the uniforms they're supplied with. If they have an extra shirt, it gets cut apart. And then they dye these items and then hand sew them to create their political banner. This would have been used in a tent for a political meeting or a rally, if you will. The one next to it here, this one's finished. You see it's a true North Korean flag. When we look in here at the stitching, you can see the roughness of the material here. You can see the roughness of the stitching, the roughness of the star being cut out. And then they didn't have enough material, so they actually had to sew another piece on here. And they dyed all these. This purple would have originally been a really beautiful blue. And what has happened is over the years, because the dye they were using they had to make, so it's not a very color-fast dye. And if it's not color-fast, what happens is just over time it begins to fade. and blues will turn to a purple, as you can see here. You can even see the stitching on the other side, how rudimentary the stitching. He said if they didn't have the thread, they would simply take thread out of something else, unravel things. This one actually has the ties where they could hang it up during whatever meeting they were having. Once again, he liberated it. He said the prisoner was not very happy that he took this item, but, it was his job. And once again, he brought it home as a souvenir. Along with other things confiscated, he confiscated armbands. So these two, once again, homemade. I mean, look at that, how long that took that prisoner to do that. And these were meant to be worn to intimidate the other prisoners. And I was going to have these translated. He had talked about having them done. I think the first time we met, he's like, yeah, I really should have someone translate those. And I never heard anything more about it. Well, when I was looking at them, I'm like, I'm going to get these translated. And in this one here, when I was examining it, I heard kind of a crunchy sound. And this was inside of it. Somehow he found somebody, and they wrote it on a napkin. I don't know why they wrote it on a napkin, but they got it translated. So this armband right here, this armband is translated as daily guard, okay? So why they would need that inside the camp, maybe it's someone like an officer of the day, okay? This armband right here, when translated, if we look right here, you can see how it matches insignia. It's like important, big duty, daily, department personnel. Once again, this is the guy that's kind of the officer of the day, the important guy of the day. And he, instead of destroying them, saved them and brought them home. Last piece here, this one is not a, quote, prisoner made. It is prisoner made, but it's not a contraband. This was one that he said that going into the compound, he worked with a gentleman who was a translator, because he spoke very little Korean. So he said this gentleman would wear this armband to denote him as a translator when they would go into the camp. And you can even see when they did it, spokesman, POW, comp number 2 versus camp number 2, which I find funny. But it's, once again, it's all hand done, hand painted onto the band. And it's just a standard armband. So I guess the importance of this is that when you look at kind of contraband bringback or souvenir bringback from the Korean conflict, Korean War, you don't see a whole lot. And stuff like this is incredibly, incredibly rare. And to have, once again, that kind of provenance from the veteran himself, that this is what happened, is just truly and utterly amazing. And what an honor. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a postscript, think about doing displays, because it was by doing a display that I was able to meet Private First Class M, and then, have this journey, which ended up with me now in possession and sharing with all of you. I mean, you think of that road, and I think that's the coolest part, is I decided to do a display. I took the effort to do it. He stopped in and saw it. He took the effort to talk to me. We did a display with him. We did several displays with him. It touched the family enough that they reached out to me when they didn't have to. They gave me the items, and now here I'm putting these items out to all of you to share. I mean, not to share, but to share with all of you. It's just an incredible chain of events. And who would have thunk, did Private First Class M right here, did he ever think that this photo someday in the future would be broadcast across the World Wide Web? I mean, that's what amazes me about history and doing this. So I hope all of you have enjoyed this. I did film this just as a postscript here again. I did film this earlier this week and posted it, and it was a malfunction, and I had to delete the video, so I've had to redo it, and it's taken me this long to get back and redo it. So I'm glad we were able to finish. Those of you who saw it first and were like, uh-oh, what happened? That's what happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, keep collecting. Keep looking. Don't become discouraged. Have fun with this hobby. You never know where the next thing is going to come from. And just enjoy what you do. That's the most important part about this. So, with that being said, this is Steve with another episode of Keep 'em Rolling, reminding all of you out there to, of course, keep 'em rolling.